Mom, it feels like the oven is still on.
My daughter stood in the kitchen doorway with 2 grocery bags against her hip. It was the hottest week of July. I had stopped cooking nearly an hour earlier, but the kitchen still felt heavy. A small table fan was running on the counter. It was moving air. That was about all it was doing. The family was due in 20 minutes, and I did not want everybody escaping to the living room. So I opened the freezer and took out 2 plastic bottles I had filled with water the night before. I set them upright in a shallow tray, folded a dish towel beneath it, and placed the tray directly in front of the fan. My daughter looked at me. "Is that supposed to be an air conditioner?" "For this table, yes," I said. "That is all I needed to cool." Within a few minutes, the air reaching the nearest chairs felt different. Not winter cold, not like central air, just cooler, softer, and worth sitting in. My name is Ruth Miller. I am 88 years old, and I live outside York, Pennsylvania. My mother taught me the idea when I was a girl. She never called it an air conditioner. She called it making one corner of the house bearable. That is all this little setup is meant to do. A fan, 2 frozen bottles, a tray, and a towel. No miracle. But on the hardest afternoons of summer, sometimes one comfortable corner is enough. And the first version I ever saw began with 2 cold metal containers beside my mother's old icebox. My mother's name was Mabel. She fed 6 people from a small kitchen that could feel warmer than the porch in July. There was no central air. There was an old stove, 1 west-facing window, and a crowded icebox. When I was about 10, I watched her fill 2 lidded metal containers with chipped ice from the icebox. She set them in a shallow enamel pan in front of a small electric fan. Then she aimed the fan toward the end of the table where my father usually sat. I asked her, "What are those for?" She said, "The fan can only move the air we already have. The ice gives it something cooler to work with." My mother had learned the idea from a Pennsylvania Dutch farm woman who lived a few miles away. That woman used it on canning days when the kitchen stayed hot for hours. Nobody called it a cooling system. They simply knew the end of the table became easier to sit near. My mother paired the ice with other small habits. She closed the shade before the afternoon sun reached the window. She finished using the stove as early as she could, and she pointed the fan toward people, not toward the empty middle of the room. Years later, I replaced her metal containers with sealed bottles of frozen water. The equipment changed. The principle did not. She was not trying to cool every room in the house. She was trying to help the air where somebody was actually sitting. Once I understood that, the old trick made much more sense. A fan does not make the room's air colder. It moves warm air across your skin, which can still feel helpful. The frozen bottles add a cold surface. As air moves around them, some heat passes into the ice. The air reaching the table may feel cooler than it would with the fan alone. The effect is local. That matters. This setup is not designed to lower the temperature of an entire house. It is designed to improve the small stream of air reaching a person a chair or one end of a table. 2 bottles provide more cold surface than 1 and are easier to handle than loose ice. The water stays sealed while a tray catches condensation. I do not promise a 15-degree drop across the whole kitchen. I do not expect the room itself to lose an afternoon's heat. What I expect is a cooler pocket of moving air near the people sitting in front of the fan. That is why placement matters more than size. If the fan points toward an empty doorway, much of the benefit disappears down the hall. If it points toward the chair where you read the side of the bed before sleep, or the table where your family is eating, the moving air reaches the place that matters. Think of it as cooling people, not cooling square footage. That keeps the method useful and the promise honest. So let me show you exactly how I set it up today. The setup is simple, but simple does not mean careless. First, I choose 2 sturdy plastic bottles with tight caps. I do not use thin bottles that crush easily, and I do not use glass. I fill each bottle with plain water, leaving a little empty space at the top, because water expands when it freezes. Then I tighten the caps and place both bottles upright in the freezer overnight. During the hottest weeks, I prepare a second pair for rotation. When I am ready, I take out a shallow tray with raised edges. A baking pan or flat plastic serving tray works. The tray catches moisture, forming outside the bottles. I place a folded towel beneath it, especially on wood. Then I set the 2 frozen bottles upright in the tray, side by side. I place the fan behind them, so its airflow passes around the cold bottles and continues toward the chairs. I do not tie the bottles to the fan. I do not hang them on the grill. I do not place them above the motor or near anything electrical. The bottles stay stable and far enough away to avoid the blades and motor. I keep the cord behind the fan and away from moisture. Then I aim the fan toward the place where somebody will actually sit. For the kitchen table, I aim it toward 2 or 3 chairs. For a reading corner, I aim it toward the chair. For the bedroom, I direct it toward the side of the bed before sleep. I do not aim it at the ceiling or across an empty room. Once everything is stable, I turn it on and sit where the family will sit. Before I leave it running, I nudge the tray with 1 finger. If it rocks, slides, or sits near the counter edge, I move it. A stable tray matters more than a perfect angle. I also check the bottles after 10 minutes when condensation is easier to see. If the airflow misses the chairs, I move the fan, not the bottles, until it reaches them. The whole process takes less than 5 minutes. The safety habits matter more than the speed. Keep water away from electricity. Keep the bottles sealed and stable. Keep the fan clear. And place the cooler airflow where people need it. This little setup works best when you stop asking it to do too much. I use it for 1 chair, 1 table, or 1 small sitting area at a time. In the kitchen, I set it up before supper. In the living room, I point it toward the chair where I read. On a hot evening, I sometimes use it near the bed for a while before I lie down. It can also help in a sewing room or small office. But the bottles are only one part of the routine. This works better when the room has already been protected from direct heat. The fan and bottles should be the final step, not the first defense against sun or a hot stove. If bright sun is pouring through the window, I close the shade before the room heats up. If the oven or stove is still running, I finish cooking as early as possible. I set it up before everyone is uncomfortable. During the hottest weeks, I keep 2 pairs of bottles in rotation. When the first pair has mostly melted, I wipe the bottles dry, return them to the freezer, and bring out the second pair. That gives me another period of cooler, moving air. I do not run the setup all day and all night. I use it before supper while reading or before sleep. My mother never tried to make the whole house feel the same. She chose the place where the family needed relief most. That is where this old method earns its keep. The first mistake is trying to cool an entire room instead of the people inside it. If the fan is pointed at a doorway, a wall, or the middle of an empty floor, the cold bottles are not helping the person who needs relief. The second mistake is using loose ice. It melts into open water and spills easily near an electric fan. Sealed bottles in a stable tray are simpler. The third mistake is placing the bottles against the fan. Nothing should touch the blades, cover the motor, block the grill, or make the fan unstable. The fourth mistake is ignoring incoming heat. 2 bottles cannot compete with afternoon sun or a running oven. Close the shade early. Finish the hot work first. Then use the setup where you plan to sit. People sometimes ask whether I add salt to the water. My mother occasionally added a little salt to her ice mixture, but with modern freezer bottles, I usually use plain water. It freezes reliably and avoids guessing at a mixture that may remain slushy. The final mistake is waiting until the room has become unbearable. I prepare the bottles the night before and set up the tray before the family arrives. That is what I did on the afternoon my daughter walked into the kitchen with those grocery bags. By the time everyone sat down, the fan was no longer just pushing the same hot air past the table. By the time the rest of the family arrived, the kitchen still looked exactly the same. Same old table, same closed shade, same small fan turning from side to side. But the chairs nearest the fan no longer felt like the worst place in the house. My daughter had put the groceries away. She stepped in front of the fan for a moment, then looked at me. "Mom, did you finally turn the air conditioner down?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "I just stopped asking the fan to move hot air by itself." The bottles were still frozen through the center, with condensation collecting in the tray. Nothing dripped onto the counter or touched the fan. The moving air was reaching exactly where I had aimed it. The children came in next. One of them pulled out the chair closest to the fan and said, "This is the good seat." That made me laugh, because when I was young, we did the same thing. Every old house had one place that felt better than the rest. A basement step, a shaded porch, a chair beside the only open window. My mother's kitchen had the end of the table beside those cold metal containers. That afternoon, mine had 2 frozen bottles. We sat down and ate without carrying our plates into another room. The kitchen was not cold, but the air around the table felt easier, and everyone stayed longer. That is what I remember most about my mother's old methods. They were not always about changing the whole house. Sometimes they saved 1 hour, 1 meal, 1 small place where the family could stay together. The bottles slowly melted while we ate, and I planned to freeze them again. Still, 1 comfortable supper does not make this a heat safety plan. I want to be very clear. 2 frozen bottles and a fan can make 1 small area more comfortable. They cannot protect you from dangerous heat. If the whole house stays hot for days, if the bedroom never cools at night, or if the air inside feels unsafe, this setup is not enough. Use the air conditioner if you have one. Go somewhere cooler if necessary. Call family, a neighbor, or someone you trust. Older adults may not notice heat stress quickly, and some conditions or medicines make heat harder on the body. There is no wisdom in proving how much heat you can endure. If you feel dizzy, weak, confused, unusually tired, or sick in the heat, stop using home cooling tricks and get help. My mother used old methods because they helped. She did not reject modern tools. On the worst days, she sent us downstairs to the cooler basement, moved our work to the shaded side of the house, or accepted help from neighbors. That is what practical people do. They use the smallest, safe solution that works, then move on when it is no longer enough. This fan and bottle setup is for a reading chair, a supper table, or the hour before bed. It is not for a medical emergency. It is not for a sealed house during a dangerous heat wave. And it is not a reason to leave an older person sitting alone in a room that keeps getting hotter. Old-fashioned does not mean stubborn. It means paying attention, using what helps, and knowing when to ask for more. So here is what I would do tonight. Find 2 sturdy plastic bottles with tight caps. Fill them with plain water, leaving a little empty space at the top. Put them upright in the freezer overnight. Tomorrow, set a shallow tray and folded towel where relief is needed most. Place the frozen bottles in the tray. Set the fan behind them with clear space between. Keep everything stable and moisture away from the cord and outlet. Then aim the moving air toward people instead of an empty room. The first time you try it, stay nearby for several minutes first. Make sure the bottles remain upright, the tray stays dry underneath, and the fan runs freely before sitting down. That is all. Do not call it an invention or pretend it replaces air conditioning. You are simply giving an ordinary fan a cold surface to move air around. My mother did not leave me a cooling system. She left me a way to make one difficult hour of summer a little easier. At 88, I think that knowledge is worth keeping. So freeze 2 bottles tonight and try the setup tomorrow during the hottest part of the day. Judge the chair in front of the fan, not the entire house. Then tell me in the comments, which room gets hottest in your home? And what small summer trick did your parents or grandparents pass down to you? Because useful family knowledge is often lost for one simple reason: nobody bothered to share it.